They slogged through the valley of the shadow of death, or something so much like that they could tell no difference. Most of them didn't dare look, but they could hear, and that was just as bad. Seuss heard the voice of his father, screaming in agony, begging for his help. "Son! Save me! They're torturing me, Seuss! They're killing me! Come and help your father! You're not there, you're not there, you're not there!" Seuss said, fiercely squinting his eyes tight shut. "Leave me alone, just like you always have." And the sound of the voice died away in a long, agonized, gurgling wail. They stumbled along in single file, eyes closed, holding on to each other, all blind, groping in the darkness behind their eyelids. Gusts of damp wind buffeted them and howled in the tops of the trees behind them, and the sandy, rocky ground threatened to overthrow them at the least misstep. The whipping wind threw whole handfuls of coarse sand against their skin, stinging faces and arms like birdshot. Stanley Pine spat crunchy grit from his lips and heard, "Loser. You never dared show your face here again, did ya, ya bum? So you found your brother, big deal. 30 years! 30 years, you worthless punk. I'm glad you left and never sent word, you ingrate. What, did you think I'd miss you? Ha! I never loved you half as much as I did Stanford. You hear me? I'm glad you never came back to us." And though he didn't say it, Stanley thought, "Pa, Ma, you're dead. Go back to resting eternally and leave me the hell alone. That's not you, I know it's not you. I don't have to prove myself to nobody, least of all you. Get out of my freaking head." His grip tightened on the baseball bat he carried, and his other hand clenched into a fist. He had always been able to fight his way out of trouble, but how can you fight disembodied voices? How could you punish the empty air? Ahead of him, his twin Stanford heard a familiar, horrible taunting voice, high-pitched and mocking. "Told you we'd meet again, didn't I, Fordsey? Remember the tune? Ah ha 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 ha. You know you're walking right into my trap, don't you? Clever to bait it with the little girl, wasn't it? You're too slow, Fordsey, too slow. I'm getting a little bored now. In fact, I think I'll kill her. If you're not here. In, guess how many minutes, you six-fingered freak." Ah ha 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 ha. But the words rang hollow, and Stanford assured himself, "It isn't Bill. It can't be Bill. It's an imitation, a mockery. It's not you, Bill Cipher. You were exterminated from our dimension by my brother Stanley, you one-eyed demon. My brother Stanley beat you at your own game, and get this, Bill, I love him. You got that? Chew on that for a while, something you can't understand, something I think you even fear. I love my brother." As for Fiddleford McGucket, well, the horrors he heard, the awful things he saw, were terrible enough, no doubt. Gibbering things assaulted him, worse than any of the unimaginable, fiendish creatures in the painting The Garden of Earthly Delights by the half-demented artist Hieronymus Bosch. They capered and threatened, reached for him with horrible claws. Fiddleford saw and heard enough to drive any ordinary man mad with stark terror. "However, that your best shot," he cackled. "I done seen worse than that, you dang hullabaloozians. Lots worse. Heck, you think you kin drive me crazy? I been there before, buddy, and let me tell you, you don't have the chops." The wind tore his cackling laughter into rags and sent the shreds of sound spinning away into the night. Right beside Fiddleford, in the lead, Dipper Pines kept his head down against the fitful wind, shivering, trembling as he took one agonizing step after another. Whatever might have assaulted him, whatever fears might have lurked in Creepy Hollow for the youngest member of the party, he seemed to ignore them, focused on one thing and only one thing. As if murmuring an enchantment that held back the worst horrors, he repeated one word with each step, "Mabel. Mabel. Mabel." Creepy Hollow might not have been a huge place, probably no more than a mile across, as they had estimated, but crossing it seemed to take forever. At last, though, Fiddleford McGucket yelled back, "We're gonna climb now, fellers. Steep slope. Hands and knees. They all fell forward, scrabbling up a hard-packed hill of broken rock and treacherous sand, rockfall from ages past at the base of the western bluff that enclosed the Valley of Gravity Falls. But as they did, blessedly the tormenting visions faded, and even the taunting voices fell to nothing. At last the only sound was the wind, now moaning and rushing overhead. They reached a level summit of solid stone. Something smacked the ground hard, then another and another. The storm was breaking overhead, the clouds that were visible as a witch's roiling brew only when the lightning flashed opening up now, pelting the earth with raindrops like bullets. "Open your eyes!" Fiddle Ford yelled. "Yonder's th cave. Run ferret afore this busts wide open." Ford's flashlight showed the entrance to them. It was indeed shaped like a mouth frozen in an expression of disgust, complete even to a central tongue, a rounded boulder that protruded 5 or 6 feet out from the cliff wall. "Hot Belgian waffles. That drop hit me like a rock. Better get inside," Stanley shouted. They hurried in, but Dipper stopped them just inside. "Hey, hold on, wait. Listen, let's wait here until daybreak." They were all, except for Fiddle Ford, still panting and shaking. "Might be a good idea," Stanley said. "After that last mile, I'm in no shape for combat." Seuss sat on the ground, staring out into the darkness. "I feel pretty bad, dudes," he admitted. Then the wind outside kicked up again with a deep, booming howl, lightning and simultaneous thunder broke right overhead, and as if the bolt had pierced the clouds, rain began to bucket down. It was like a whole fleet of fire trucks up on the crest of the bluff had opened up with all their hoses. The crash of water filled the world, and in the light of Ford's powerful flashlight it looked as though they had sheltered in the cavern where Fiddle Ford McGucket once had built a submarine monster robot. "What about Mabel?" Stanford shouted over the noise. "We have to find her." Dipper nodded miserably. "I know, she's in danger, but the dragon won't kill her. It will keep her alive, in fact, because for some reason it needs a human. It won't hurt to wait, and it may even help. The gnomes say the creature is weaker in daylight, and it won't even know we're here until the butterflies wake up and start flying out of the cave and see us. The butterflies are its scouts." Dipper nodded. "It only sees what they see." Ford stared hard at him. "The gnomes told you all that?" "Yeah," Dipper said, looking downward in the glare of Ford's light. He took off his pine tree cap and wearily rubbed his forehead, ruffling his brown hair. Stanley and Stanford Pines gave each other a glance. They'd both seen the birthmark, shaped like the Big Dipper, that had given their grandnephew his nickname. "It's him, all right," Stanley said quietly. "Not an illusion." Stanford knelt on one knee. "All right, Dipper, we'll trust you. Did the gnomes tell you how to defeat this so-called dragon?" "No," Dipper admitted. "I just know a little about it. They say it's not from the Earth. It came here from another world millions of years ago. It was collected by an alien race from a distant planet, but when their ship crashed where Gravity Falls would be one day, this specimen escaped and holed up in this cave because it couldn't stand the light. Or maybe its ancestor did. The gnomes have legends, but they don't really go back that far, so maybe it's just a story." "I wish I'd known that earlier," Ford said. "We could have gone to the crashed ship and found some weapon to use against it." "Reckon it's something we found traces of in th ship?" Fiddle Ford asked. "A dragon? I don't recall anything like that, but of course we didn't find every single mystery. The shapeshifter, certainly, you remember that creature, Fiddle Ford, and the trouble it gave us." I wonder if, but it might be too dangerous, even if it worked." "What are you thinking of, Poindexter?" asked Stanley. "Well, there's a chance that I could summon one of the ship's automated containment pods. It's tricky, they're nearly identical to the security pods, and Dipper will tell you how one of those nearly took me to some far-flung planet that might not even exist any longer." Yeah," Dipper said. That was pretty scary. But the containment pods were meant to retrieve any specimen that escaped." I'm not absolutely sure, but I think that unless they're shut down once the creature is acquired, they're programmed to take anything like that back to the home world where it was captured. That's what I made o' their strange fantastical writin', Fiddleford agreed. If'n I figured out their language good enough. You did, Stanford said with a smile. I had enough proof of that. This might have been after we parted ways, but I once was able to modify one of the pods to capture the shapeshifter when it broke free. Then, fortunately, I contained it in a cryonic chamber, freezing it. How can you, summon one of these pod things, Mr. Pines? Seuss asked. Ford fumbled in his pocket for a moment and produced a keychain with something that looked like a toy flying saucer dangling from it. With this. It's a miniaturized communicator, and it uses tachyonic transmission, so it's instantaneous. However, I haven't tested it, and because it might call the wrong kind of pod, I'll have to wait until we actually see the creature to try it. If it'll save Mabel, Dipper murmured, do it. As a last resort, perhaps, Stanford said. Let's hope we can just find her and get her out of this place. We got hours to go before dawn, Stanley said. Might as well try to get some rest. Let's take watches while the others settle in. I'll do the first one. What time is it now, Ford? 3:17 and 11 seconds, Stanford said. Oh, thanks loads for includin' the seconds. Well, that gives us about 2 hours until sunup. Okay, half-hour turns. First I'll watch, then Seuss, then Fiddleford, and Stanford goes last 'cause he needs rest the most. What about me? Dipper asked. Stanley clapped a hand on his shoulder. Kid, you got moxie, but I want to keep you safe. So you stay here. I won't stay behind while you look for Mabel. Yeah, well, we'll argue that out in 2 hours. Now lay down and try to get some shut-eye. Time crawled past like a half-dead bug. They rotated watches with nothing happening, no monster appearing, no threat visible or audible. At first the lightning outside split the night with jagged streaks of molten white light, and the thunder pounded so hard that the earth shook. Then the rain outside slacked to a mere torrential downpour, and eventually the lightning and thunder grumbled off to the east, but the persistent deluge continued. The air drifting in from the cave mouth turned unpleasantly damp and cool, though it smelled of fresh rain. Then, as the night outside began to lighten faintly, not yet daylight, far from it, but rather a kind of visible gloom, Stanford, standing his turn on guard, suddenly gave an urgent, rasping whisper, "Something's coming." They all leaped up, alert, both Seuss and Stanley brandishing their weapons, but Stanford said, "No, not from deeper in the cave, from outside." They turned, nerves twanging. And, from the fading night outside, emerging through the gray curtain of rain, something lurched in. Stan and Seuss both leaped forward, raising their bats and yelling awe. The figure from outside raised a weapon, an axe, and charged forward. Ford shone his light. "Wendy!" Dipper yelled. "It's us!" Wendy Corduroy, her long red hair soaked, her eyes wide and blinking, said, "Guys? I totally tried to call you, 100 times." She shivered a little in her soaked, sopping clothes. "Melody called and told me where you were goin'. Man, I thought I'd go crazy followin' you, spooky crap out there in the dark. Why didn't you answer my calls?" "No phone reception around here," Ford said. Stan turned on him. "What? When were you plannin' to share that little news bulletin with us, genius? You mean we can't even call for backup?" "Yeah, and what about that spaceshipy doodad, dude?" Seuss asked. If there's no reception, Ford raised his six-fingered hands. Now, calm down. I told you, the communicator works on tachyonic principles, not like a phone. I mean, tachyons are faster than light particles, except when they behave like waves. Wendy pushed past them. Dipper! Where's Mabel, dude? Back in there somewhere, Dipper said, backing away from her. Don't hug me, okay? Wendy stopped in her tracks, and when she spoke, she sounded hurt. Okay, dude. But I'm real glad to see you. Why no hug? Because I couldn't stand it, Dipper said miserably. Off to one side, the two adult Pines twins were arguing hotly as Fiddleford and Seuss listened to them. Dipper jerked his head, and Wendy followed him a few steps away from the others. Then, so softly that only Wendy could hear him, he said, I never got over you. I guess you kind of know that. Yeah. I guess I kinda do, Wendy said, giving him her crooked, beautiful smile. It's cool, Dipper. Okay, man. Dipper swallowed hard. Remember the dance, when Seuss DJ'd and Pacifica won the popularity contest? Remember, we were taking tickets? Wendy, I wanted so bad to ask you to dance. Just one time. But I was too scared. I'm sorry I'm such a dork. Don't sell yourself short, dude, she said softly. You're, like, an amazing guy, you know? But, don't we have something kinda important to do? Dipper squared his shoulders. Yeah. But, if something happens, Wendy, I just want you to remember that I'm so sorry we never danced together just once. That I was such a chicken. It's okay, dude, really. All right. Ford said loudly. Yes, I should have told you, but there was nothing we could do about it anyway. It's getting light. Let's go find this beast and rescue Mabel. I'm with you, Mr. Pines, Seuss said. Me, too, by cracky, echoed McGucket. Yeah, whatever, Stan growled. Just one thing, bright boy, let me take the lead this time. I don't think whatever lives here's gonna be much impressed by your IQ. You lead, we'll follow. You'll need this, Stanford said, handing over the flashlight. Though gray light had seeped into the cave entrance, the way beyond lay pitch dark. Stan looked around and then glared at Dipper. Kid, you stay here and guard the rear. If it sounds like it's going bad, you get out of here and run for help, understand? Ford better give you his phone, just in case. Soon's you get a signal, call for help. Wendy, I don't guess there's any use in telling you to hang back here with him. Nope, she said, running a thumb over the cutting edge of her axe. Okay, but you stay behind me. Can't really tell because of this rain, but the sun's up. Must be by now. Let's roll out. As they edged cautiously into the darkness, Stan flashed the light all around. The cave looked as if it had been warmed by eons of water. They had to weave between stalagmites that were taller than Stan and Ford, and overhead stalactites hung down and looked shiny and oozy in the flashlight beam. They gleamed with dull colors, ochres and faded oranges, creams and a kind of reddish purple the hue of rotten plums. Geez, it's as wide as a cathedral, Stan muttered. That was true for the first section. However, maybe 100 yards in, the surroundings changed. The cavern shrank down into a rounded tunnel, smooth-sided, no stalagmites or stalactites at all, and only 10 feet or so in diameter. It was as if a gigantic drill had cut a smooth, winding passage through solid rock, though scatters of water-smooth loose stones lay underfoot and threatened to trip them at every step. What's that? Wendy said suddenly. In the beam of Stan's light something floated toward them, dark and undulating. Stan raised his bat. Butterflies. McGucket said. A cloud of them. Don't let them land on you, Ford cautioned. Remember, they can stab you with their proboscises. I don't care if they got stilettos, snapped Stan. Butterflies wear heels? Wendy asked. Faintly, though not from far away, came a voice. Who's there? That's Mabel, Stan yelled. We're comin', Pumpkin. No. Before they could even move, a small figure charged past them all, running all out. Stan yelled, Dipper! Get back! But it was no use. Dipper had pulled ahead. He rounded a bend and yelled, Mabel. The others followed as closely as they could. For a few seconds it was impossible to comprehend just what they saw. The beast waited in its lair. It seemed huge, 30 feet or more in length, a heavy-bodied, coiled, serpentine thing but with multiple sprawling legs and a long, lashing tail. Except for the head and claws, its whole body bore gleaming orange scales. The head swayed, just a dark brown rounded nub, showing no features, no eyes or mouth or nose, but a squirming mass of tentacles, a dozen of them or more, black and writhing. One of these had stretched taut, and at the far end of it lay Mabel Pines, a thin strand of the tentacle wrapped around her neck. "Dipper," she murmured, sounding not upset, not happy. The tentacle pulsed. Dipper reached her and pulled at the tentacle, then he bit through it. Dark fluid gushed, the monstrous body thrashed, Mabel screamed, and the tail of the beast whipped round like a gigantic scorpion's sting. The sharp, chitinous blade at the tip of the tail plunged into Dipper's back and burst at his chest. He had been speared like a fish. The tail thrashed, sweeping him into the air and then hurling him face-first into the stone wall with a sickening crunch. Stan, screaming in fury, slammed his bat against the thing's head. Wendy chopped through a striking tentacle, but another seized her wrist. Hot anger boiled in her, the tentacle throbbed, and the beast jerked as though scalded, dropped its hold and scrabbled away, backing frantically. Its scales fell off and took to the air, no, not scales, but butterflies. They rushed past the attackers, not striking at them but in a panic-stricken rush heading for the cave entrance. Naked in the light, the creature was an enormous, jointed, insect-like thing, its body thicker than a man's thigh, its carapace the shiny dark brown of a roach's wings, its 5 pairs of jointed legs ending in claws, its menacing whip-like tail spur dripping some greenish venom. But it backed away, scraping against the tunnel wall, then backed itself into a small dark hollow, and there it seemed to crouch in fear. Mabel clawed the remnants of the tentacle from her throat and was crawling to where Dipper had fallen face down and still. "Seal it up!" Ford yelled. "Quick! Get loose rock, anything you can find, and pile it in the entrance to that hole. We have to trap it." Seuss and Fiddleford hurried to carry out his orders, grabbing the biggest chunks of smooth rock they could find. The creature writhed in its lair, but it couldn't seem to get any further away from them, and it couldn't get its stinger into play to strike at them. It shrank from Ford's flashlight, and he held it pinned in place with a lance of light until the other two had closed up the 2-foot opening. "No," Stan was saying from where he knelt on the cave floor. "Oh, no, no, no." "Dipper," wailed Wendy, holding his limp form. "Come on, man, you can't die." Mabel had crawled far enough to grasp Dipper's outflung hand. She lay face down, sobbing bitterly. "Let me through," Ford told them. He knelt and placed 2 fingers against Dipper's neck. He stood, shaking his head. "No pulse," he said softly. "Aw, no." Seuss groaned. "Don't say that, Mr. Pines. Not Dipper. I wish it had been me." Stan grabbed Ford by his coat lapel. "Come on, smart guy. Think. There's gotta be something you can do." "There's nothing," came a woman's voice. It sounded unspeakably weary. Stan shone his light. Half lying against the far wall was a woman, gaunt and pale, dressed in faded rags. Fiddleford said in wonder, "Mayellen?" "Nothing you can do," the woman repeated, her voice flat and lifeless. "Nothing anybody can do." The reality settled on them like the darkness of the cave. This was no phantasm of Creepy Hollow, no nightmare out of the mindscape, no illusion. It was too real. It was final. Dipper Pines was dead. Ford tried to talk, gasped and sobbed, and then said, Stanley, you get out. Take the others and get Dipper out. I have to stay to make sure this thing doesn't escape. As soon as you're clear, I'll send for the pod to collect it and dispose of it." His brother shook, grief and rage twisting his face. "Not on your life. Seuss, you get him out." "I'm stayin' with my brother." Ford could barely talk. "Stanley, please. I'm begging you, please, do you hear me? Save Mabel. Leave me to finish this." Stan shouted, so you send for a pod, and what happens if the wrong one comes? Is it gonna kill you, too? Ford, I can't handle it. He broke down, shuddering with grief, unable to speak. Stanford put a hand on his brother's shoulder. He took a deep breath, but his voice was husky. Stanley, listen to me. You have to do this. You have to hold it together. The kids need you. Now, I really think I have a good chance of containing this thing, but we have to work fast. I don't know how strong it is, or how easily it might break through our rock barrier. You've got to get Mabel and the rest to safety. I depend on you, Stan. I trust you. Do Dipper this last favor. Get him out of this place, please. Stan swallowed hard, hugged his brother, and groaned, You better not die, you bum. See you outside. I love ya, man. Stan, I can't take this. Go now, please, Ford whispered. Seuss, his face dripping with tears, said hoarsely, Please let me carry Dipper. Mr. Pines. You take Mabel. She needs you. Fiddleford was crying, too, collapsed on the floor, sitting with arms and elbows jutting, shaking his head as the tears ran. I never wanted anything to happen to the boy. He was a good man, and I caused all this. Stanford, I'll stay by your side if you'll let. Ford shook his head. Fiddleford, you have a responsibility now. And my brother will need your help and support. Especially if this doesn't work out. Please go. It's better that way. Take Mayellen and get her to safety. Fiddleford got unsteadily to his feet and slipped his arm around the woman's waist. She seemed unsure and unsteady on her feet. I never thought I'd see you again, he told her, his voice cracking. She sighed, staring at him in wonder. Fiddleford, is that really you behind that awful beard? I know something sad's happened, but I can't feel it. It's like some story I read. Oh, I wish I could feel something. I've been drained, Fiddleford. It's been so long. Softly, hoarsely, he said, Come on, darlin'. We'll talk later. They took a few tottering steps together. Mabel could not hold back her racking sobs. She clung tightly to her grunkle as he lifted her as easily as if she were just a baby. Her tears fell hot on his neck and shoulder. Dipper! Oh, Dipper, why? Dipper's at rest. It's over, sweetheart, Stan rumbled, patting her on the back. I know how you feel, pumpkin. Go ahead and cry. Let it all out. You're safe. Grunkle Stan will never let you go. Off to the side, a white-faced Wendy shook with a storm of grief. Like hell it's over. Dipper, why don't we kill it right now? She asked. She balled her fists. Mr. Pines, pull away the rocks and I'll chop that damn thing into kindling. Earthly weapons won't work on something like this, Ford said firmly. No, we have to do this my way. Wendy, if you feel anything for Dipper, help the others get his sister to safety. Wendy looked defiant and tried to talk, but even she broke down in sobs. Stan put his free arm around her shoulders, and she slumped against him as he and the others started trudging back to the cave entrance, and then from the darkness ahead of them came a tentative voice, guys? Stan took his arm from around Wendy and jerked his light that way. A boy stood on the fringe of the beam, a familiar face, though drawn and troubled. Stan fumbled the light, trying to steady it, and almost dropped it as he staggered with surprise. Dipper! We saw you, are you, Dipper? Wendy pushed past Stan, hugged Dipper, lifted him off his feet, and swung him around. Oh, my God! Dipper! Is this really you, dude? Dipper gasped and felt dizzy, and not just from being whirled in a circle. Why yeah. Bro. Mabel squirmed out of her grunkle Stan's hold, leaped down, and threw herself on Dipper and Wendy. The three hugged, laughing like maniacs. Wendy just would not let go. Dipper, man, don't ever do that again. I really thought I was gonna die. How'd you do it? What did you pull off, man? Dipper shrugged in her embrace. It wasn't my plan. Well, not exactly. Guys, Seuss is carrying Dipper 4. And back behind me a little way is Dipper 3. Someone stepped into the cone of light, a boy with his arms behind his back, and it was another Dipper. Guru? Mabel asked. But who is this I'm carrying? Seuss asked. I mean, I'm glad to see you, Dip, but this kid died. I think Dipper 3 should explain, Dipper said softly as Wendy finally let go of him. Now that they stood side by side, the others could see differences. Dipper 3 was inches shorter and looked younger than the real item, and in the beam of light he looked oddly faded, his skin tone and clothes in muted hues. He stood with his left arm behind Dipper. He sighed. My brother there, the one Seuss is holding, and I are clones. Or copies. Dipper created us a year ago when, he grinned weakly, he made this elaborate scheme so he could dance with you, Wendy. There were lots of other clones, too, but I guess they're all gone. Yeah, Dipper said sadly. Tyrone was the last one. And even he didn't get through the whole night. 4 and I were really lucky. We got a whole year. Once when it started to rain, the way it's doing now, we hid in this cave and found what the dragon was doing to this lady. We figured it out, but we didn't know how to help her. We're fading, see. We're not much good at making new plans. Mabel said, that thing was taking away all my feelings. Yeah, 3 said. It lives on the energy of emotions. It absorbs them through its feelers. Steals them from its victims and leaves them unable to feel anything. A centivore, Ford muttered from the rear edge of the group. A creature that devours feelings. We think it started out small and attracted little animals and birds that it attacked. That scared them, and each time one was scared the dragon absorbed the fear and grew a little. Then somehow it became the host for the butterflies. They scouted for it, and in return it produced some kind of liquid that it dripped from its skin. The butterflies nested on the creature at night and fed on the liquid. The butterflies marked victims with a triangle symbol, and through that the dragon sent out some kind of lure, some signal, that drew the victims to it. A remarkable symbiotic relationship. Ford said. We were immune to the dragon's powers, 3 went on. Because we don't have real emotions, just copies, imitations of them, it didn't sense food in us, so it let us alone. But over the last year, we too had developed some kind of telepathy. 4 and I could even communicate mentally, and we were always at least vaguely aware of what Dipper was doing. When he started to look for the McGucket woman, we decided our time had come. We could get into Dipper's mind just enough to give him hints and suggestions. But we had to capture him outside the cave so the thing wouldn't catch him and we could carry out our plan. Sorry about that. What plan? Ford asked. 3 said, well, think what it's like when any kid gets too much candy or ice cream. He gets really sick, right? We figured if we could overwhelm the monster with enough powerful feelings, it would be temporarily stunned. With all of you in the cave, we thought the strongest emotions would come if you saw Dipper die. 4 volunteered. I couldn't. Why not? Stan asked. In answer, 3 held up his left arm. It ended as a stub at the elbow. We dissolve in water, he said. I got careless last spring and fell with my hand in a puddle. I couldn't impersonate Dipper. Oh, my God, Wendy said, looking shocked. That's why the little dude didn't want me to hug him. I was wet to the bone. Mabel was staring at her little, in the true sense of the word now, since he still looked 12, brother. It hurt so bad to think Dipper died, she whispered. I felt like I was torn in half. I'm really sorry, 3 said. But 4 and I knew we were running out of time. We're fading, and we can't avoid water forever. If we had to go, we thought there was no better way to go than saving Mabel. We can't love you as much as the real Dipper, sis, but we feel our own echo of his love for you. He smiled, looking a little teary-eyed. Awkward sibling hug? With only 1.5 arms, it was truly awkward for him, but they hugged, and the taller Mabel leaned to whisper, "Thank you both so much." "Okay," the real Dipper said, "now we really have to get out of here. Great Uncle Ford, if you're gonna capture this animal, let me stay and help." "No," Wendy said. "Dipper, you get out, man." "I'll stay. I'd rather die myself than go through that again." "Nah, kid, I'm an old man," Stan said. "If I gotta die in some weird way, I might as well do it side by side with my knucklehead brother." "I'll stay with you, Ford." "We'll all stay," Mabel said firmly. "The rest of you go." "Not me, girl," Wendy said, brandishing her axe. "I'm not leaving Dipper and you." "Seuss," Stan said, "I'm giving you the responsibility for getting McGucket and his missus out. And take care of the dead boy, son. As a favor to me." "Yes, sir," Seuss said. "Come on, guys, follow me." As they started out, 3 asked softly, "Seuss, can I carry my brother?" Seuss still mourned the clone's death. In a teary voice, he asked, "Dude, isn't he too heavy for you? We don't have to go very far." Seuss helped the maimed 3 put his brother's body into a fireman's carry. They went on to the mouth of the cave. Outside a steady, steely gray rain still poured. 3 stopped and took the pine tree cap from 4's head. "Here, this is the real Dipper's," he said, handing it to Seuss. "Get it back to him, okay?" "Sure thing, little dog," Seuss said between sobs. "Hey, you Pines guys are real brave dudes. I just wanted to say that." "Thanks, Seuss. Now if you'll all wait about 5 minutes, I'm just going outside with my brother. I may be some time. Don't watch, okay?" They turned away. They heard him step up to the edge of the opening, pause, take a deep breath and a few steps into the rain, and then silence. When Fiddle Ford, Mayellen, and Seuss left the cave, no sign of the 2 clones remained. And curiously, when they descended into the valley of Creepy Hollow, they heard and saw nothing but the sound of drumming rain and distant thunder, the sight of the flooded ground and the crashing raindrops. No terrifying visions. No fears to face. Except one. "Dudes," Seuss said solemnly, "now I wish I had stayed behind. Man, I really hope they all come through this okay."